very much Rishihood and Manika for inviting me over. It was long pending, and I was feeling very guilty that I have been refusing or expressing my inability to come earlier. But at last I've made it. One thing I really hate about some of these seminars is a long introduction. I feel so embarrassed because for one thing, those introductions do not represent me. I've changed a lot. And what I have realized over the years is that in design, we are giving a lot of explicit importance to creativity. We are not giving any importance to care. And I think care is a very important domain. Unless creativity and care is brought together, we will not be able to move in the directions that we all aspire to do it. We talk of care, but it becomes part of the jury, and it's implicitly there. We emphasize a lot on creativity, not so much. Another thing that I realized is that how do we bring care into the classroom? And what we did at IIT Delhi, we got a pet dog into the classroom. And perhaps the design studios, design classrooms of tomorrow will have pets floating around. There'll be plants and pots, and students will be taking care of that. I think it's important to bring in this domain of care in between these lectures on creativity and exercises on creativity. Another topic that has been touched upon in this seminar is the question of heritage. And what is this heritage? And how come that nature is so creative and so sustainable? It is because there is a heritage that is shared by all species. And it's important to understand how this heritage is being communicated or transferred from one species to another. There is a value structure there in the species, and they know where they have to stop. I think this is something that we really have to look at. Post-retirement, I've been essentially teaching sustainability, focusing on nature, trying to get inspirations from nature. It is in this context I would like to give my presentation on the non-human origin of Indian identity. And why I'm emphasizing the word non-human is that the moment we bring in the human, they start fighting with each other. They want credits. And come to think of it, the identity may have been given words by human beings, but its origin is non-human. And that's where we go to the nature. We in the classroom talk of primary research and secondary research. And I think where we are caught up and not able to find our ways, that when it comes to heritage and identity, we confine ourselves to secondary research. Some books we have read, Quran, Bible, Ramayana, these are secondary research, secondary data. The primary data belong to the rishis who wrote these texts. What was it that they were exploring? And I think it's important to take a look at that. When we do secondary research and confine ourselves to secondary data, this is what happens, okay? Even when we are creating temples, we'll be stuck. Next slide. You have gone through this controversy, okay? And Beshram Rang, and recently I saw this image done by nationalist MLA, and you have a bodybuilding contest, female bodybuilding contest. Even the dress code does not take inspiration from the Olympics. It takes inspiration from maybe the beauty pageants. Next slide. Then you have these very young boys, all under 20, lynching somebody, okay? And at the same time, they're not concerned about cows eating plastic. So there is a disconnect, and this disconnect is essentially because we are relying on secondary data. We are not going to the source. And as a consequence, we are not going to the values. Next slide. India has a very, very diverse geography. It also has a diverse linguistic history. Ethnic diversity is there, religious diversity is there. Now, how come India has so much diversity, whereas the rest of the world does not have? And it is essentially because of our rishis. They realized the importance of diversity in creating an ecosystem which will sustain for a longer time. And so we say it is the oldest living civilization. It is because there is diversity. But at the same time, we want oneness. We want a nationalism. We want everything to be one language to be spoken all over the world. Next slide. If you go back to 600 BC, just imagine Buddha, Mahavir, so many other people coexisting, and they are having debates, they are having discussions without any conflict. There are no fights, there are no violence. Sometimes there would be show of mystical power, creating miracles or making miracles happen. But there were no evidence of violence. And why is it so? And this is essentially because there was a shared methodology of thinking. Like in a conference, in a science conference, there may be debates, there may be different viewpoints, but there is not a fight. Because there is a common platform of thinking which everybody shares. Now, what is important is to understand this connectivity of ontology, axiology, epistemology, methodology, methods, and artifacts. We as designers are more familiar with this, okay, the last three. First three, the philosophers and the researchers do think about it. I think it's very, very important for us designers, especially when we do primary research, to look at the first three. When we focus on the first three, it will give us directions for doing something new and meaningful. It is only these first three will bring in that element of care. Next slide. Next. So essentially this is what I'm saying, that it's important that we bring this ontological inquiry into it, and change and continuity and diversity together and being in sync with the primordial and ultimate is at the core of Indian culture. Okay? And this is what we have to get to the core of Indian culture. And the core of Indian culture is life itself. Next slide. So there is so much emphasis. In Jainism, they'll just say, Jio or Jine Do, Ahimsa Parmo Dharma. Respecting life, understanding life. Unless you respect a person because that person is living, we will continue to see them as objects. So it's important to give more importance to life itself. These are some images, very interesting, how animals from different species have been seen to care for each other. So here is a buffalo which is trying to help a tortoise which is turned on its back. No personal gain, but it's doing it because it knows that here is a living creature, and because it is living, it is to be respected, and it is in a problem, so it has to be helped. Here is a bear trying to pull out a crow which was drowning. Here is a chimpanzee who is trying to help an antelope. Here is a dog who is trying to put some water on the fish which has come on the ground. Go into the thinking of these animals. And this is where our religion is derived from. Next. We talk of Dharma Chakra. Now, we may think that this is a Buddhist concept, though it is shared by Hindus and Jains also. Next slide. But Dharma Chakra is something very fundamental to life. And that's how we have to see it. It is in the beat of the heart, the breathing of the lungs, it is waking and sleeping, it is the day and night, it is the changing seasons, it is the cycles of time. This is very interesting. One question always arises that what is it that happened in the evolution of life that set the evolution going? So there must be some one event, some one invention which made life sustainable. And Krebs cycle is one such thing. It is the energy cycle. This cycle just goes on and on. And because it goes on and on, it just keeps producing energy, which is necessary for the cell to survive. So just imagine how many such Krebs cycles are happening inside your body. This is a very interesting, I don't know if we can click on that. And this is what they have discovered in the mitochondria, that there is this device which actually rotates. All the time it is rotating. And by rotating, it is triggering different parts of the chemical reactions. Vasudev Kutumbakam. Now, how do we see this? For one thing, if you look at the origin of the word, then it means all living beings on earth is a family. But often we confine it to human beings, okay, which is. So what it is saying is that the world is an ecosystem. And I think it's very, very important that many of these things, we should see them and understand them in terminology which is not religious, which is not parochial, which is not partisan. Okay? And once we do that, then we'll be able to apply it in a much larger context. Dependent arising, very important concept in Buddhism, that we all are interconnected. We all are interdependent. Nothing exists by itself. Together we arise. So that's what is happening in the ecosystem. And if you look at the human beings, there is more bacteria in our human being, in the human body, than there are cells. So we may say that we are more bacteria than we are human. But unless that bacteria is there, we wouldn't survive. So there is this ecosystem. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Next slide. Sarvodaya, well-being of all. In evolutionary sciences, we call it symbiosis. So forget about, I think life sciences is the new religion. And let's focus on that as a designer. And then let's try to create an identity based on that. Symbiosis makes adaptation easier. And so it is life supporting. It requires less amount of energy, less amount of effort. And that's where diversity comes in. You have these examples. Next slide. Diversity, as I mentioned, it facilitates symbiosis, makes adaptation and evolution easier. Next slide. We have to make effort to realize our potential. We have to stretch ourselves to further enhance our abilities. This is what evolution is about, and this is possible when we work together, when life supports life. And I think that's the basic objective of design education, to stretch ourselves, to be able to use our creativity for caring. And once we have that focus, I think design education will go a long way. Next slide. Now, if you look at these principles, then what we find is that human well-being is important, sustainable development, circular economy, and evolution of life. These will be the 4 driving principles in design education. These have also been the driving principles in evolution of life itself. Thank you. And come to think of it, why are we afraid of AI? We are afraid because we feel that AI will not care for us. That's what it is. Why we feel that it will not care for us? Because we have not programmed it in that manner. And we have not programmed it in that manner because we don't understand what care is. So thank you very much.